Welcome back to another episode of the Jacob Johnston Show. Okay, so before I get into this episode, let me just go ahead and clarify something for you. All right, because I came back after the last episode and I saw the comments, and some of you are confused. This is not a live show. All right, now I get it. If you're watching on Rumble, if you're watching on BitChute, if you're watching on YouTube, you understand that this is not live. And the audio podcast listeners, of course, they understand that it's not a live show. But some platforms, well, you can't upload the video. Right? And so the only way to be on those platforms is to stream as if it's live. So I pre-record the videos. And then I stream the recorded videos as if it were live. Okay, so hopefully that clears up the confusion, because if you're asking me questions in the comments and expecting me to be able to answer you, I'm not even in the studio at the moment. I record the show. I do the editing. Obviously, the editing is decent because you think it's live. And then I upload the pre-recorded video into the software and then hit stream for those particular channels. So don't ask me questions and then wonder why I'm not responding. Now, if you ask me questions, maybe I'll go through the questions and answer them on the next episode. But since it's not live, I can't answer you right here, right now. Okay. All right. So now that we got that programming note out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the show. All right. So the left is threatening that if they don't get their way, they're going to engage in violence, which just means it's a day that ends in Y. In this particular case, it has to do with the murder trial of police officer Chauvin in the George Floyd death case. Okay. So there's a lot of things going on. I mean, this never should have gotten to trial to begin with. I mean, it was already proven that George Floyd died of a fentanyl drug overdose. The officer didn't kill him. That was proven. That is scientific fact. That is indisputable fact, but the left doesn't care. And they're going off and they're saying, hey, you better do guilty or we're going to riot and destroy the city. So here's a little bit of the media trying to cover that.
Nation on edge. This morning in Minneapolis, the National Guard is at the ready in anticipation of a verdict this week in the trial of Derek Chauvin. Protests continued for a seventh night in the aftermath of another police shooting, claiming the life of 20-year-old Dante Wright. And then there are the mass shootings, the most recent at that FedEx facility in Indianapolis. 8 lives lost in a senseless rampage after months of deadly assaults across the nation.
Okay, so just a couple of things there. One, it's always bewildering that these mass shootings always happen in Democrat-controlled states with very strict gun laws. And yet, that's where it happens. Same thing with all these police shootings that the media keeps wanting to go on about and claiming that the police are racist. And yet, these police shootings keep happening in Democrat-controlled areas. But let's go ahead and take a look at this a little bit more. Again, I have my notes. They help me out. So be it. Anyways, I want to go through here and take a look at this from a bit of a different perspective, because we've covered multiple times now that Officer Chauvin did not kill George Floyd. He died of a drug overdose. Right? Chauvin could have not done anything, could have not even pulled him over, and George Floyd was still going to die from a drug overdose. Right? That's what happened. That is proven. And that was proven by the medical examiner. That was proven, scientifically. That was, been proven every way, shape, or form. The fact that this even got to trial is a travesty of justice. Right? But let's take a look at this a little bit more of how the left is engaging in society, because they're no longer engaging by the rule of law. They're no longer paying attention to facts, science, evidence. They don't care. They have their narrative, and their narrative is all that matters to them. And anybody who points out any indisputable facts that debunks their narrative is racist, which is what they call anybody who disagrees with them, and they have no argument against the disagreement. All right, they can't debate, they can't, support their position, so the only thing they can do is just shut down debate, shut down talk, end free speech, and censor the internet. They do this on a variety of topics, and they keep doing this more and more and more because they have no argument. But what they're doing right now is trying to create a class system based off of race, where your skin color determines whether or not the law applies to you. If someone of one skin color breaks the law and the police try to enforce the law and that person reacts violently, resisting arrest, pulling a gun on the person, or, and decides to ingest an overdose of narcotics, well, you know what? Because of their skin color, they can't be guilty of a crime. Therefore, what the police did was wrong. I mean, you have another police shooting incident and where the person just dropped the gun just seconds before getting shot. Just like maybe a second or two before getting shot. Yet they had the weapon and they were threatening with it. I mean, it's the case as it is always in these situations, like 99% of the time. The police shooting was justified. But in this particular case with George Floyd, it wasn't even a police shooting. It was the officer was there trying to calm the guy down, not realizing that he was overdosing on drugs, tried to restrain him, and then the person died of a drug overdose. What would the officer do anyways? It's not like he has the medical knowledge or capabilities to administer treatment, or, it's not like he had the medical supplies to treat a drug overdose. But the left doesn't care. You got to understand that. They don't care about all that. Their narrative is skin color determines whether or not the law applies to you. And narrative is all that matters. They need to convince you that the country is racist. And so now that this is at trial and all the evidence, being presented by the prosecutor and the defense, and all the evidence shows that Officer Chauvin is innocent of the crime, or innocent of, the charges against him, that his actions were not responsible for George Floyd's death. The left doesn't care. Just like, truth, reality, science be damned, according to the left, justice be damned. It's no longer, innocent until proven guilty. It's no longer letting the facts of the case determine the verdict. No, it's mob rule. You tried to enforce the law on a person of this skin color, therefore, you're guilty. You're guilty just because we say you do. We don't have anything to back up why we think you're guilty. And we're going to call anybody who defends you as racist. It's mob rule. It's guilty by association. And this isn't the first time this has happened throughout history. Basically what the left has decided is not only are certain skin colors, immune to the law, and that it's a crime to apply the law equally. But now, if they claim racism on anything, then you're automatically guilty. And if you try to profess your innocence, that's only more proof of your guilt. And so the only way you could hope for redemption is to just plead guilty. Just admit that you're a racist and then pay them for racial sensitivity training. This reminds me of another situation where something like this happened in history. It was called the Salem Witch Trials, where just the mere accusation of being a witch meant that you were guilty, right? And you were damned no matter what. The more you professed your innocence, the more you were seen as guilty. And if you just confessed yourself as guilty, well, then you're damned. You're damned either way. They're either going to kill you for being a confessed witch, or they're going to kill you because the test to see whether or not you were a witch would kill you. It was basically, we're going to drown you. If you survive, you were a witch. If you didn't, oh well. That's basically what the left-wing mob has done here. You know, they're trying to threaten violence through the mob to get a verdict that they want, even though all the evidence debunks their claims and debunks their narrative. It's the Salem Witch Trials. Unbelievable that this type of ignorance and stupidity is allowed to happen in 2021. I mean, this is like, when was the Salem Witch Trials? Back in the 1600s? Apparently, you know, some people haven't evolved. Their intellectual capabilities are still stuck 400 years in the past. Unbelievable. But the left, of course, needs to convince you that racism is rampant in America, which is why they need to say that everything they disagree with is racist, because they have found power in victimhood, which is why they're trying to do the whole George Floyd was murdered by a cop, and why they keep promoting this false narrative that police are shooting these innocent black people who did nothing wrong, or, you know, were only guilty of minor offenses, when in reality, they, you know, what had happened is they committed a crime, then they resisted arrest, and a lot of times they attacked the officer or threatened the officer with a weapon. Because there's power in victimhood, is what they have found. See, it's no longer cream rising to the top. It's everybody rushing down towards the bottom to claim to be a victim of something. Because now, if you're a victim, well, now that's the new celebrity status. And plus, if you can claim that the whole country is bad and is victimizing you, then you can claim the country owes you something. And then you can start demanding things like reparations for something you never suffered. You can start demanding new laws that basically say, hey, your skin color is immune from the law. You know, to get rid of all policing, which means criminals get to run rampant. They get to rob you, and they get to beat you down. They get to do whatever they want to you because there's no police. Who do you think no policing benefits? It benefits only the criminals. But they need to create a situation in which they get to still claim victimhood, so that then they can use that victimhood to justify any action, to justify looting, to justify arson, even to justify murder themselves. After all, to them, it's just justice. You know, it's just justice for being victimized. They're a victim no matter what, because there's power in that now. And for some reason, society has decided to give them power for whining about not having life handed to them on a silver platter. And you know what? It's not even the majority of the country. It's not. It's just a small segment of the country that believes in this power through victimhood, who are just able to get these cowardly, spineless corporations, and some corporations that are run by a bunch of left-wing lunatics that are going in, caving in, and trying to enforce it. You know, like a shadow government. Unbelievable. And it is sickening how they get away with this. National Guard being called because they're worried about the outcome of the trial. It would be a travesty of justice for a guilty verdict to come in, especially for a guilty verdict to come in specifically because people are afraid that their neighborhood and community would be burned down, because the jurors are afraid that the mob will be so upset that the mob will attack them, dox them, go to their house, and maybe even torch their house with them still in it. It wouldn't be the first time. that the left has set fire to a building knowing people were still in it. So now it's justice through fear of the mob. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's the Salem Witch Trials. Okay. All right. So that's enough of that. I just get so sick of the left. They are destroying the country. They are setting back the clock of progress and trying to take us back to the days of class systems, elitist rules, authoritarians. And next thing you know, they'll want to reinstate a king, and rule by birthright. They're trying to set the clock back 400 years. All right, so in other news, the left does sometimes provide us some good ideas, about things that we can do in order to, avoid the authoritarian left. One of the things that has always just kind of baffled me is this whole sanctuary state and sanctuary cities for illegal immigrants. Here it is. You got politicians conspiring to help criminals evade federal law enforcement who are aiding and abetting in an illegal act. And yet somehow, just by declaring themselves a sanctuary, the laws don't apply. And therefore, they themselves can't be charged with aiding and abetting criminals. Sanctuary states. Now, this also is the start of the end for any national unity, as now any state can pretty much just declare themselves a sanctuary against any law that they don't like. That's really what the door is open for. The more these sanctuary states for illegal immigration is allowed to stand, the more I say, hey, you know what? We here on the right in the red states have the ability to create sanctuary states from left-wing lunatics. We can now declare ourselves a sanctuary state in which laws passed by the Democrats and Biden do not apply. And in fact, one state seems to be already ahead of the game in implementing this trend. So, you know what? Nebraska, I gotta, salute you. I gotta tip my hat to you. I don't like you. And that's probably because of the rivalry between Iowa and Nebraska. But hey, in this instance, I gotta give you credit where credit is due. Take a look.
Joining us now is Nebraska Republican Governor Pete Ricketts. He is pledging his support for the right to bear arms, signing a proclamation to make Nebraska a Second Amendment sanctuary state.
Congratulations, Nebraska. I think you're on to something here. See, a state like California will declare themselves a sanctuary state and sanctuary cities in order to violate the Constitution, in order to undermine the Constitution and the constitutional authority of, the federal government in order to, determine our borders, the security of our borders, defend the country, and, to enforce federal immigration laws, which is a power of the federal government delegated to them by the Constitution. But when a red state, a conservative state, or, purple state currently in control by the Republicans, decides for the first time that they're going to declare themselves a sanctuary state for something, it is in defense of the Constitution, to uphold the constitutional rights of the people against the federal government's unconstitutional acts to try and take away the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Yes, the Democrats, of course they don't care about the Constitution. Of course they don't care about freedom and liberty. Right? Their whole ideology is authoritarianism that requires them to divide the country and to segregate the country. We even have left-wingers now having segregated dorms and segregated graduation ceremonies. They brought back segregation, but this time, a bunch of minorities actually think that maybe this time segregation will be great. So in this particular instance, though, what we are seeing here is saying, hey, the Democrats, they've made it very clear. They have no intention of abiding by the Constitution. And they're going to try and take away our constitutional rights, which they have been taking away our constitutional rights every which way they can, especially since the coronavirus hit. They've been using that as an excuse to suspend our civil rights and liberties guaranteed under the Constitution. And as we'll see, they have no intentions of ever ending the suspension of civil liberties, because once they've taken power, very rarely has an authoritarian ever surrendered that power peacefully and voluntarily. So, yes, this whole sanctuary, state for Second Amendment, I very much agree with it. I support it. And it should be done across more states. And you know what? I say we need to declare ourselves sanctuaries against a lot more of left-wing policies, as long as it doesn't violate the Constitution. Any policy that they want to implement, we now declare ourselves a sanctuary in which those laws do not apply. Right? Now, there's a lot of reasons why I don't think those laws apply. Certain platforms won't let me actually talk about what those reasons are. But that's besides the point. The left started this. They started declaring that they can just, declare certain laws that they don't like as null and void within their state territory or within their city limits. Now, the fact that they've been able to get away with that, has begun the process of unraveling the unity of the country, and we're going to start seeing more and more sanctuaries for this, sanctuaries for that, and a complete unraveling of the country. They started it, and you know what? Turnabout is fair play. I say we are a sanctuary against whatever the left tries to push. So whatever laws they try to implement, especially the ones that are unconstitutional, we declare ourselves a sanctuary. Hey, here's an idea. Declare yourself a sanctuary state in which the government's so-called, abortion, the Democrats, favorite abortion clinics are not allowed. Any, laws, any rulings in which says that people have a right to abortions, just declare yourself a sanctuary state in which those are null and void, and then ban abortion altogether. And no matter what any court tries to say or do, because, well, a lot of courts are packed with a bunch of left-wing activists anyways, who don't abide by the Constitution, who just made up this whole abortion rights, being part of the Constitution out of thin air. Just don't listen to them. Make sure that these abortion clinics can't get a business license. They're not, they are defined not as medical care providers, and shut them down. Make it impossible for them to be able to operate. You're a sanctuary. Go through, do what the left does. Declare yourself a sanctuary in which what you don't like doesn't apply anymore. All right. Now, of course, we're still going to respect the Constitution, because we're not leftists. But we're not going to allow the left to just, oh, what do you know? In between these two lines, there's a secret new right that we declare, or there's a secret exemption to your constitutional rights that we didn't previously know about. It just showed up out of thin air. So now we just rewrite the Constitution through the courts. No. That is over. Sanctuaries. There we go. Let's steal an idea from the left in order to void the crazy things that the left are doing, their attempts to undermine our constitutional rights and their attempts to overthrow freedom and democracy. We're not going to stand for it. I mean, it's been known for a long time that the left has been pushing us towards the next civil war. I mean, it's undeniable. You take a look at the way the left is going, and they have gone so full batshit crazy that there is no way to reconcile with the left, because the left is devoid of reality and basic reasoning. They reject facts. They reject science. All they care about is their truth, what they personally believe, and everybody else must bow down to them. You can't reconcile with that. So you know what? If we're on an unavoidable collision course, then at least in the meantime, we're going to make sure that we do not, surrender ourselves to these authoritarians, that we're not going to surrender our civil liberties, our rights and freedoms, that we're not going to surrender democracy. And we're especially not going to surrender our ability to defend ourselves or the ability to be able to fight to get our freedoms back. All right, so I applaud you, Nebraska. All right, let this be a trend. Any left-wing policies are null and void in red states. Their attempts to take away our Second Amendment rights, well, it doesn't matter what they pass in D.C. It's null and void in red states. You still want to get an AR-15 in a red state? There you go. You want to be able to continue to get clips and magazines, however you want to say it in whatever area of the country that you are in. Well, guess what? We're going to create sanctuary states in which you can get 40 round magazines. There you go. 50 rounds. Hey, let's make a 60 round magazine. All right? Let's go for it. Now, of course, the left, they don't want anything like this getting out. They don't want, Republicans to realize that they can start creating their own sanctuaries against left-wing policies. They don't want it to get out that we do have constitutional rights. They don't want all the evidence to get out about them violating the Constitution. So yes, they engage in censorship. They suppress information. You got YouTube promoting, CNN as a credible source, even though they've been caught on video, admitting that they promote and push propaganda, specifically for the purposes of trying to help the Democrats. But now, cancel culture and censorship, well, it far extends into the school system now. And now, if you're in the public education system and you reject, left-wing ideology, their political ideology, their political agenda, well, now students are facing backlash for independent thought. Yes. So if you actually believe in science, the Democrats are going to, punish you in the school system. They're going to silence you. They're pushing cancel culture in public schools. Can't have an educated youth because they grow up to be educated adults. And educated adults don't vote Democrat. So what you got to do is undermine the public school system, change it into an indoctrination camp, and then try to convince the uneducated masses that they're the intelligent elite. So there's a report on here about how cancel culture has spread to the classroom.
Cancel culture in America's classrooms. Teenagers being chastised for their conservative beliefs. Unbelievable. Meet Avery Severson, who was so inspired by Charlie Kirk that she decided to start a Turning Point USA chapter at her Minnesota high school. She described the fallout she received on Fox and Friends. Watch.
And these rumors online started going around about me, accusing me of sending racist, terrible, hateful messages to a black student at my school with no evidence pointing to me.
And in Virginia, teenager Julia Sayville had to leave school after being shamed over her Black History Month project on Candace Owens. She shared her story with Tucker Carlson.
I received an email that morning of my presentation that it was disrespectful of me to highlight her as a black trailblazer, and she stated how she believed Candace was racist.
Wow. Okay, so let me get this straight. Black History Month, you decide to do a report on a black woman, and the left decides, no, that's inappropriate. That's the wrong black woman in order to do a Black History Month report on. So the left is deciding which black person is and isn't good. Which this one good, this one bad. They're deciding what black culture is, what they need to look like, and who needs to be idolized. God forbid you ever go through and do a report on someone saying, hey, you're not a victim anymore. You're a victor. You can go out and rise unlike your ancestors. You have the opportunity to rise up and reach the top of society. You can even be president of the United States. You could be a millionaire, successful business owner. I mean, we see examples of black people and members of the black community rising up all over the country, becoming business owners, millionaires, in charge of government all over the place, in elected office. And yet the schools don't like this. The schools don't like the idea that black people are being taught they can still actually grow up to be anything. They can succeed. Why? Because the school, being run by leftists, want to tell minorities, especially black kids, that they're victims, that they're always going to be victims, that society will keep them down, no matter how talented they may be. And so it's best not to try. Just settle for mediocrity at the lower income scale, maybe lower middle class, and vote Democrats so that you can get table scraps. That's what the schools want to push on to black kids and minority kids. So you can't have a report of someone out there who is black, successful, talking about how anybody can be successful in this country, regardless of skin color, because it defeats and debunks this whole victimhood narrative. This victimhood narrative where you teach kids from a very young age that because of their skin color, it's hopeless. They can't do anything or be anything. And then we wonder why it is in these left-wing cities that have high crime rates in minority communities. They've been raised their entire life to believe that they're a victim and they can't succeed no matter what they do. So they give up. And they can't live off of minimum wage. Of course, minimum wage, no one's supposed to spend their lifetime on minimum wage. That's just a starting point. Minimum wage is basically just for high schoolers, just to earn a little extra income while they go to school. You're not supposed to spend your entire life flipping burgers at McDonald's. Right? You're supposed to have some ambition and go out there and rise up. Whether you start your own business or you just work hard and rise up through corporations, or learn skills here and take it over to this company here for a pay raise. Right? So, but this whole preaching victimhood and then punishing anybody who cites examples of, members of minority communities rising up and becoming successful. It is unbelievable. And because the left has no arguments, they have to stop debate. That's what cancel culture and censorship is all about. The left unable to defend their policies, their ideas, and their claims. So they just have to shut down debate. And it's the indoctrination. You must regurgitate left-wing ideology, or we're going to flunk you in this class. And if we flunk you in this class, you won't be able to go to college. And if you don't go to college, you won't be able to get a good job. So it's using the school system, not only as indoctrination camps, but forced indoctrination camps, where they threaten your future, your ability to be successful in the future. They threaten that in order to force compliance. And we're not talking about grades for like math. Did you get the right or wrong answer? When with math, there is an absolute right or wrong answer. And it's not like science, which is supposed to be the discovery of truth. I know the left hasn't figured that out. Just because you have an opinion doesn't make it a scientific fact. You have to be able to prove it through the scientific method, right? Which means you have to actually be able to test your theory, and the test has to come back with the results that prove you right. You never get to that testing phase. You never get to the observation of the results. You just stop at, I have a theory, I have an opinion, therefore it's scientific fact. And some people now are out there trying to twist it around, going, science isn't about what you can prove, it's whether or not anybody can disprove your theory. And of course, it's almost impossible to disprove a theory, because the moment you disprove it, they update their theory to claim that you didn't disprove it. They go, oh, no, you forgot about this. It was like, well, that wasn't part of your theory. Well, it is now. And so you didn't account for this, and they can keep changing it until you run out of money and then claim you didn't disprove it. No. It's up to the person with the theory to prove that theory correct. Okay, so they're trying to enforce indoctrination. They're trying to define what is and isn't black culture, black identity, and who is and isn't black, not based off of skin color, but based off of political beliefs and their adherence to Democrat ideology. Sad. The school system is supposed to be a place of learning, of seeking truth, seeking understanding. Instead, it's become a place where ignorance is enforced, where students are not taught how to think. They're told, you must believe this, and anything that you bring up that disproves this is bad on you, and we will fail you. It's a place where learning has become discouraged, right? And a place where certain groups of people are taught from the very start of their education to think, act, and behave as victims. They're not raising a generation of leaders. They're raising a generation of Democrat voters. A generation of kids that are mentally chained to the Democrat Party is what they're doing. Parents all over the country should be outraged by this. They should be, you know what? Maybe if we started acting like leftists and started rioting against the school systems for this type of crap, for trying to to try and prevent learning, to try and, enforce victimhood mentality from the get-go. Maybe if we started rioting at the schools, maybe they would stop with the indoctrination camps and bring back education again. And, it's really sad and heartbreaking, listening to these interviews, of these kids who are being bullied, who are being called racist, who are, just being treated like dirt, just for trying to say, hey, this country is not racist. Hey, let's actually engage in lifting up everybody regardless of skin color. For just trying to say, hey, here's a black person that is great. Let's do a report on them. It's really sad. What happened to all these anti-bullying campaigns? Apparently it's okay as long as you're bullying in the name of Democrat ideology. Then I guess that's okay. And then, of course, you get the reports, of teen suicide is up. Now, of course, part of that is COVID, but maybe part of that is the enforced victimhood indoctrination. Well, hey, if life is going to be a hopeless struggle just because of skin color, hey, why go along with it? Well, what's the point of living in it? You might as well end it now. Of course, They promote abortions, which, largely means the left is, slaughtering by the tens of thousands of black children in the womb. So I guess, the whole suicide thing is not really a concern to them. The left needs to stop. The left needs to stop with this crap. They need to stop, with the destruction of education. They need to stop with their, divisionist rhetoric. They need to stop with, with their hopes of keeping racism alive. Because the only racists in the country are Democrats. That's pretty much, that's always been the case. If you take a look at racism throughout the history of the country, it's been led by the Democrats, and, racism today is no different. It's being, ginned up by the Democrats. And part of that is they teach victimhood, and then they try to claim that victimhood is power. Sickening. Now, of course, the Democrats, they're not done with their attacks on the Constitution, but, after 4 years of Trump and being able to get some decent judges, which, were by and large a disappointment in a lot of areas by their failure to actually defend the Constitution, especially at the Supreme Court, where they chickened out because they were afraid of the left-wing mob, so they didn't bother actually defending the Constitution. But there are probably enough judges out there that will stop the liberal insanity and stop their attacks on the Constitution and our rights. And the Democrats, they can't have that. They need to find a way to basically overthrow the judicial branch. And they have that way. It's called court packing. But what's interesting is, like with all things Democrats, is how they try to justify it. And part of their justification is pure delusional insanity. So let's take a look at this delusion up front.
Democratic Massachusetts Congressman and member of the House Financial Services and House Transportation and Infrastructure Committees, Jake Auchincloss. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me, giving up a few minutes of your Saturday. We really appreciate it.
Molly, thanks for
kick off. Yes, I want to kick off with one of the hot topics of the day, of course, and your colleague right here in Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey, is among those leading the charge towards expanding the Supreme Court. Now we have the commission that's been being put together by President Biden under the leadership of President Biden. Your thoughts, just, as a baseline, where do you stand on what is sometimes called court packing, expanding the court?
The overarching goal is to depoliticize the Supreme Court. We're in this position right now because for the last decade, Leader McConnell politicized the court through antics like blocking Merrick Garland from even getting a vote on the Senate floor.
So would you adhere to some of the suggestions of adding as many as 4 justices that have been suggested by some Democrats?
President Biden has wisely put together a bipartisan commission of 36 experts who are going to study this issue with the gravity and the diligence that it deserves. I'm looking forward to that analysis.
Democratic Massachusetts Congressman and member of the House Financial Services and House Transportation and Infrastructure Committees, Jake Auchincloss. Congressman, thank you so much for joining me, giving up a few minutes of your Saturday. We really appreciate it.
Molly, thanks for
kick off. Yes, I want to kick off with one of the hot topics of the day, of course, and your colleague right here in Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey, is among those leading the charge towards expanding the Supreme Court. Now we have the commission that's been being put together by President Biden under the leadership of President Biden. Your thoughts, just, as a baseline, where do you stand on what is sometimes called court packing, expanding the court?
The overarching goal is to depoliticize the Supreme Court. We're in this position right now because for the last decade, Leader McConnell politicized the court through antics like blocking Merrick Garland from even getting a vote on the Senate floor.
So would you adhere to some of the suggestions of adding as many as 4 justices that have been suggested by some Democrats?
President Biden has wisely put together a bipartisan commission of 36 experts who are going to study this issue with the gravity and the diligence that it deserves. I'm looking forward to that analysis.
You know, it is true what they say. You can always tell a Democrat is lying if their lips are moving. Okay, so they want to go back and say the Republicans politicize the courts, especially the Supreme Court, and they go to Merrick Garland. As if history of the Supreme Court and the politicization of the court only started in 2016, that there was no history before then. But the truth of the matter is the Democrats have politicized all levels of the judicial branch, including the Supreme Court, for decades. I mean, there's even a term for trying to sabotage judicial nominees. It's called borking. And it was instituted by the Democrats when they tried to go after a justice. I forget his first name, but his last name was Bork, hence borking. You know, and you remember what they did to Kavanaugh in order to try and stop his appointment to the Supreme Court? They tried to accuse him of sexual assault, but that wasn't the first time they tried that tactic. What is it, Justice Thomas? They also tried doing that to him as well, over a decade ago. You know, nearly 2 decades ago. The Democrats have been politicizing the courts and trying to stack the courts with a bunch of radical left-wing activists who basically say the Constitution doesn't matter. Their political ideology, their political policies, that's what matters. And so the Constitution doesn't exist. The Constitution is whatever the Democrats say it is at that particular moment. You know, it's another situation in which the Democrats are trying to accuse the Republicans that which the Democrats themselves are guilty of. They do it all the time. They do it all the time. And the court packing isn't depoliticizing the court. It's taking the politicization of the courts to the extreme. Because if the Democrats can pack the courts, then that means the next time a Republican gets into office and has control of D.C., then that means we'll pack the court. So they want to add on another 4 justices. Okay, the next time a Republican is in, we're going to add in another 10 justices. You know, maybe another 20 justices. You know, and every time the political power in D.C. changes, the courts will be expanded. I mean, we can play that game all you want. You know, you're not going to be in power forever. But of course, their whole idea is if they can pack the courts, then they can forever end democracy in the United States. And therefore, no Republican will ever be able to get elected because they'll challenge any election results in which a Republican wins in the courts, stacked with left-wing activists who are just going to rubber stamp whatever the Democrats want. Plus, the Democrats plan on violating the Constitution. They're already going after our Second Amendment rights. They've made that clear. They've been attacking our First Amendment rights, and they've been attacking many other rights that we have under the Constitution. The courts right now, the Supreme Court, having a 5-4 supposedly, conservative justices, which I question that after, 2020. But in any event, supposedly has a 5-4 conservative majority, will be able to strike down much of the Democrats' attempts to violate the Constitution and end democracy. So the only way for them to get around that is to pack the courts, to just add in how many people that they need to in order to ensure that the courts will always side with the Democrats no matter how unconstitutional the actions are. There is no depoliticization of the courts here. You're only furthering the politicization. You're taking your past politicization of the courts and just taking it to the extreme. The Democrats, they will never appoint anybody who will just look at what the Constitution says and rule based off of that. No, they want judicial activists who will legislate from the bench and somehow claim the authority to rewrite the Constitution. Also, the Democrats can do whatever they want. There's just no arguing with a Democrat. They don't live anywhere near reality. They don't bother with the truth. They don't bother with facts. They live in their own delusional fantasy. And no matter what facts or evidence is presented, they got titanium skulls that are impervious to facts. In fact, not only that, but they are conditioned through the public school system to have a violent reaction to facts, information, and data. All right, so I had a little bit more that I wanted to get to today, but I see that this is running a little bit longer than I had planned, so I'm just going to go ahead, end this episode here, and then I will circle back. Circle back. What am I, the White House press secretary? No, I'll come back and finish up because there's some things that Dr. Fauci, I use the term doctor loosely here, has said that I want to be able to get to. And I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to cover it. Some people have covered it. But there's some things that he has said, in congressional hearings, and there's things that have been said in his media interviews that I want to get to because I think it's very important because he is a disgrace to the scientific and medical profession. All right. So I want to thank you so much for watching this. I'm expecting that if you are watching this, that you're watching this on Rumble or BitChute. I prefer Rumble, but BitChute is a good second. I doubt you're actually watching this on YouTube. I'd be surprised if YouTube actually allows me to show up in the search results. So I don't really bother with YouTube much. I only upload to YouTube because it doesn't take any more effort to upload to YouTube while I'm uploading to Rumble. All right. But if you're watching this, please follow, all right, by hitting the subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything, of course. Hopefully you got that figured out by now, even though there are some studies that say if you tell them to subscribe, they think, they have to pay for it. Maybe that's with the older generation. But hopefully by now you know that subscribe is just another way of saying follow on the video platforms. And for you audio listeners, I want to thank you so much. Audio listeners is where I get the biggest portion of my audience from. So thank you very much for that. If you're listening for the first time, hopefully you enjoyed the show. And you follow, by hitting the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode. Please follow me on Parler, Gab, Minds. I'm still kind of iffy on MeWe. We'll see what goes on there, whether or not we can resolve some situations. But you can follow me at Johnston Show, on Parler, Minds, and Gab. I'm also on Reddit, but I'm not sure, I don't really check in on Reddit that much. I just post the link and that's it. So, you can still get me there. If you still insist on Twitter and Facebook, then yeah, it's still at Johnston Show on there as well. All right. Thank you so much. And I will be back again soon.